Even just the words that we use have power in terms of how people view us, and whether that's for better or for worse. We can learn the words, we can become more articulate, and it doesn't mean we have to lose our culture, right? We have to find that balance because our culture is who we are. It's where our heart comes from. But to learn new skills that can create success just based on the way the words we're using and how we present ourselves verbally is very powerful. And podcasting itself makes that available globally, worldwide for free, which is why I'm a fan of podcasting.
Welcome to the Super Clinic Project Podcast, where we take regular clinic owners and turn them into cash-based multimillionaire entrepreneurs. Warning, if you're a doctor who listens to this podcast regularly, you will make millions of dollars. Do not listen to this podcast unless you want to be a successful clinic owner who helps thousands of patients achieve their health goals and adds more money than you can imagine to your bank account. You've been warned.
Welcome to the Super Clinic Project Podcast, where we take regular clinic owners and we turn them into super clinic owners. I'm one of your hosts, Jennifer Glegerich, and today you'll be here with me with the co-host of All Ears English, because being a clinic owner means being an entrepreneur. And we like to bring people on who are builders on this show. Today's guest has built a multiple six-figure education business. Her podcast is downloaded 4 million times per month globally, and it's been ranked as one of the best of Apple Podcasts. She's been featured in Podcast Magazine, Forbes, Language Magazine. So let us give a huge Super Clinic welcome to CEO and language maven, Lindsay McMahon, to the show. Welcome, Lindsay. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm really glad to be here and to chat with your listeners for a bit today. So thank you.
I'm very excited to be able to talk to you because what you've built, we have clinic owners, right? So they were working in the industry, very insurance, healthcare executive, and they've broken out, right?
Okay.
And all of them, you did the same thing. You broke out into something that was very different. Before, if you wanted to learn a language, you would have to go to a school, to do that. And you've decided to do something very different. It's a really interesting niche and career, and you really had to be a trailblazer, I think. So how did you tell us about your story, how you got into it?
Yeah, well, I started teaching English. So again, my podcast teaches English as a second language to global professionals, right, who speak English as their non-native language, those who want to do business around the world, or who want English for travel and just for having a more cosmopolitan global life, wherever they want to go or whoever they want to connect with. So I started my career teaching ESL, English as a second language, globally. I lived in Japan for a year and a half. I traveled South America for a year, and I had my own experiences learning languages. And that's really key. So I can connect with my audience. I know what it feels to learn a language and to feel disconnected at times due to the language. Right? That's how I got into it, by just sampling what was out there in terms of ESL education, how things were being done that could be better, and experiencing the actual endeavor myself of language learning. So
I think everyone struggles with this. It's interesting, that you teach ESL and that you had just talked about it opening doors globally. A lot of people, I go on many different podcasts and talk about my story, but I have come from a really great family, but you'd think I had a silver spoon in my mouth. But then when I was in college, like a teenager, I was homeless. So I was living in a shelter. Sometimes I wasn't in a shelter, and I ended up just going through extreme poverty, right? And one of my teachers, I had a very Texasy twang, at the time. And I say teacher, she was actually a counselor. She was from Haiti. I went to University of Miami, and she was linked with the homeless shelter Covenant House, which only has children 21 and under. That's all they serve. Yeah. And she gave us this exercise, and she said, okay, if you had a group of people in the world, how would you know who is successful? And we said, oh, their clothes, what they look like, their hair, their jewelry, their shoes. And she said, okay, take that all away. They've all been freshly scrubbed down. How would you, and they're naked, right? And of course we're kids. And how would you know who's successful? And well, by the manner of how they speak. And she said,
Yes.
let's talk about this. And she had the most incredible speaking voice. She goes, I come from Haiti, but one thing I learned is that there's a universal way you can conduct yourself. And it doesn't matter how rich you are, doesn't
Hmm.
matter your gender, your orientation, your race, nothing matters. It's called, she goes, well, at that time, she said, American business,
Hmm.
culture. She
Hmm.
said, if
Hmm.
you learn the uniform, suit, or
Hmm.
a suit dress, or and you learn the language, business English, very specific.
Yeah.
She said, she goes, you can go around the globe and every door will open for you. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking, oh, I want to know that. It was like
Yeah.
this golden key. And I worked on it. And now, of course, I've gotten the twang back, but I'm really sad now when I hear people say, no, you don't, you just want to, speak how you speak at the house. And I'm like, but that's never going to unlock doors. There's this one thing that really does unlock doors, whether you like it or not. It is
Right.
the complete unifier. So I love it. I love the fact that there are people all over the world, 4 million downloads a month, who who still know that, who haven't let the forces that would keep that down, who would destroy that opportunity for anyone to be
Hmm.
able to access it. So we can have this unifying global way that anyone can say, I'm going to tap into that and I'm going to
Yeah.
go to Walmart because we didn't have money. I was homeless. It's not like they gave me an Armani suit. It was George. That was the brand at Walmart. And they had black slacks,
Hmm.
white shirts, and different, but it was a smart little outfit, black and white, just very neutrals. She taught us how to do neutrals. And I got jobs over people who had huge degrees, who had lots of money and connections
I love
because of
that.
this class, right? So I love the
Yeah.
fact that you're helping other people do that so that they can get out of whatever their thing is into wherever they want to be. Maybe it's not even
Yeah.
bad where they're at. They just feel like their soul leads them somewhere else. So
Yeah, it's an important point you're making, Jennifer. I mean, even just the words that we use have power in terms of how people view us and whether that's for better or for worse. We can learn the words, we can become more articulate, and it doesn't mean we have to lose our culture, right? We have to find that balance because our culture is who we are. It's where our heart comes from, but to learn new skills that can create success just based on the way the words we're using and how we present ourselves verbally is very powerful. And podcasting itself makes that available globally, worldwide for free, which is why I'm a fan of
yes.
podcasting. Yeah.
I know that
Mhm.
there's a lot of doctors who are doing incredible work right now. And I just want our audience to know that, it's not so much the wild, wild west that podcast used to be. It is truly an industry standard now that, that everybody's got a podcast. Well, they do because it works and you're able to
Yeah.
really target in to people who want to hear what you speak about.
Yes.
And if you're doing any cutting edge stuff, or if you know that you can help people, it is an incredible medium. Can you talk to the audience about that, how they could launch a podcast or what they need to
Mhm.
be thinking about for that?
Yeah, it truly is an incredible medium. It is amazing. I'm a little biased, but I do believe it's a lot stronger in terms of a connection thread between you and your audience if we compare it to even YouTube or writing like blogging or any other way or social media, Instagram. I believe there's something very special about this intimate connection that you're in their ears during important moments, key moments of their day. They're walking their dog, they're in the park, they're driving to work. You are like their companion, their friend. That's a very special role. That's different from a YouTube channel, again, or an Instagram channel. It's you and them, right? You're there together. So, it's very powerful to build a brand and not just to build an audience, but to communicate what you believe about your industry. So I like to say, taking a contrarian perspective in some way against what you see is maybe not working in your industry, the way other providers are delivering a service or their take on it, maybe a traditional take. Maybe you have a contrarian perspective. And I can give an example of how we do this and you're going to voice it. You need that podcast as a stage to voice what you believe about your industry, what works, what doesn't, and directly speaking to the people you want to serve and showing that you have empathy for them for whatever they're going through.
So talk about that. So let's say you're well, one of our eyes, you're a clinic owner, or maybe you're just another entrepreneur. I know that I have a lot of people that came from my other podcast to here that are listening that are
Hmm.
entrepreneurs on
Yes.
anything. And they're like, okay, well, I piddled with a podcast. Maybe they did like couple of episodes, but it fell
Yeah.
flat. I didn't, no one, my mom only listened to 2 minutes and I cried, like, when you first start out, it's difficult, right?
Oh, it's so hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes.
can you give them any tips on, just a framework? If you're going to
Sure.
do it, here are some things to do.
Yeah, it's true, Jennifer. Great question. I was reading some scary statistic today about the pod fade. The pod fade, meaning most people publish 2 episodes and then call it quits because it doesn't catch on. It is legitimately difficult to get yourself that audience to get off the ground, get moving, get the systems in place. But I would say, in terms of a framework, start by thinking about what you offer your industry and your audience, again, that is contrarian or different. So, an example of this for us is very early on. It wasn't when we first launched the show. So you don't need this to launch, but you probably need to come up with this within the first 20, 30, 40 episodes. Figure out what it is. For us, it's human connection. So in my industry of language learning, most people don't go beyond the language. Most people stick with, are we saying this grammatically correctly? The old linguistic models, the rote memorization. But we came on the scene and we said, no, being correct, being perfect is not the reason we learn a language. We learn it for human connection. So what that meant logistically is we just came up with a phrase, and our phrase is connection, not perfection. That came out organically in our episode number 50 something, like 55. However, we were already getting there to that theme because we had traveled the world, taught English, and we understood that. We just didn't have words yet. We
I
didn't have a
love that.
slogan yet. It came out organically, naturally on an episode, and then we trademarked it. I went to the trademark office and trademarked that slogan. It costs about $2,000 to trademark a slogan, a very good value and a good deal, because then you're building around this idea. And then people rallied around it because I knew that this is something much deeper than grammar, much deeper than being right, being perfect. People want human connection. So that is the first part of the framework I would offer your listeners. Figure out what you believe, and it's helpful if it's contrarian, because then you can talk about who we're for and who we're not for. There are going to be listeners that all ears English is just simply not for them. Maybe they are linguists, or maybe they are grammarians, and we're not for them because we do we make grammar mistakes, but we don't worry about it. We're going to teach you how to connect, not how to be perfect. So that is step 1 of the framework for your listeners, Jennifer.
No, are you doing? I'm going to do this for us too. I'm literally taking my notes here
Yeah.
because, but I also too listen to your podcast. And then when you talk about connections and being able to connect, I've had the hardest time learning the language. And when you talk about doing something different, so this is someone else. Her name is La Cucaracha Sarah,
Uh-huh.
and she had a book, Spanish is for real. So I do have another book on there, but it all is like the bad words, how to like slang, to do
Yeah.
slang and to
Yeah.
do different things like that, and it gives you just a little bit of grammar, but mostly it's just how to just say things as you were and what to listen for. And
Hmm.
so I thought, well, that's exactly what you just said. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like I want to actually be able to speak to someone
Yep.
and have them not just go, okay, well.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's kind of like what is the end result that you want for your listeners and ultimately for yourself too, that is one step beyond the service you're offering, right? So the service we're offering is I'm going to show you how to,
Yeah, yeah.
conjugate a verb, right? I'm going to show you how to the difference between turn in, turn over, turn out, but that's not really what I'm trying to offer. I'm trying to offer how do you find the human connection in any conversation when you happen to be using these words. So if your listeners can find what is that next step that brings it to the human needs level, that is the recipe for a lasting brand identity. And then from there, you're building an audience that also buys into that. I can't tell you the number of times our listeners have emailed us and said, connection, not perfection. I believe in this too. That's why I
Ooh.
love your show. That's why I listen to your show every day. And that is every marketer's dream. And again, it goes so much beyond marketing, but it is on some level, it is marketing. It builds an
It's
audience.
not just a marketer, any entrepreneur's dream is that
Yes.
you have, I mean, you didn't do this, you wanted to provide value out in the world. You felt this call
Yes.
deep
A hundred
inside your
percent.
soul
Yes.
that there
Yes.
was a way you could do something different and better
Yes.
and you could help people better.
Yeah.
And gonna, if you're listening and you're an entrepreneur and the only reason you're doing it is because you just wanted to make more money, I'm
It
gonna
won't
tell you,
last. Yes.
you're gonna
Yes.
it's gonna be a terrible failure. And even if it's not, I've known people like this who did make a lot of money, but then on the flip side they had heart attacks early. They were absolutely
Mm.
miserable. They didn't like their life. They were the type of people who are never happy, right?
Yes.
So you can drive yourself into an early grave very quickly and do it.
Hmm.
I'm not saying if you don't just give up everything else in your life and be the worst parent, the worst husband, the worst son,
Hmm.
we have real-time examples of very famous people, and you're like, gosh, I wish I had that money, but I really wouldn't want to have that personality, or I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to have the hate that gets thrown at those people, or I wouldn't want, like, think about Elon Musk, all those kids. And
Mm.
then one of the baby mamas he paid actually went on social media and was like, you need to pay because we are at the doctor's right now. And she posted
Wow.
a lie on Twitter, and it was for this medical expense. I guess they were fighting. He was like, I'm not going to pay. And she was like, and it's like, who,
Wow.
nobody in their right mind would trade the money for that, or
Hmm.
to have to, to be the person that everybody's like,
Yeah.
ooh.
Yeah. And so we throw around the word authenticity. And I think though we said earlier that podcasting is an incredibly powerful medium because it is
Mm.
so intimate. There's a flip side of that, Jennifer, which is that if it's phony what you're saying, if you don't believe what you're saying on a visceral level, people will immediately hear that. And we have an incredible monitor on podcasting for BS, right? People will figure out you're not real. So to attach, what's important is to attach your contrarian perspective, your philosophy to an origin story. Is there a story of an experience you've had in your real life? This is part of the framework we're preparing here for your listeners. Is there a story of something you went through where that moment became very clear that you wanted that thing, the human connection, I think especially for medical providers, this is
I'm going to tell you,
there
every
should be a
single doctor,
no-brainer here. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
every doctor I know as a chiropractor has a very specific pain-based story
Yes.
where
Yes.
they were screwed over personally by the system. They
Hmm.
couldn't move, they couldn't do
Yeah.
something, and that's how they got there. Or someone they loved, that's how they
Yes.
got there. I mean, I'm going to tell you, healthcare people particularly, they've got a lot of stories, but how, they need to be able to get them out.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of, I think a lot of people don't want to come across as I'm a marketer or I'm a
Yeah.
salesperson. And so I think the great thing that you've been talking about here is it isn't about that. It is, I mean,
Mm.
it is
It's
about that.
personal.
You have a business, you
Sure.
market, and you're a salesperson. The moment you put your name on a door somewhere, or you sell something out of your car trunk, you're now, that's who you are, right? But
Right.
there's an authentic, good way to do it, and then there's the way that make people go, wow, you're full of it.
Yeah, this is what makes it sustainable as a business. As you said, that you're not going to burn out early. You can take this business for 10, 20, 30, 40 years because you've built the audience based on a truth for you, something that is true for you and is true for your audience. And it can build a very successful, rewarding company for yourself. So,
And so, but that's the trick, right? So that's the
mhm.
big trick. So let's say you have it and you're doing great and you're enjoying the podcast, you're meeting great people, and then you're spending money on it too. Let's say you don't know how
Yeah.
to do the editing, so you pay for editing, or the
Mhm.
things that we do, right? Platforms you
Yes.
want to be on. How do you monetize it?
Yeah. Well, so this takes time. I mean, you need the audience. There's no money where there's no audience, right? So
Right.
there are a lot of ways. Eventually, I could tell you how we monetize in essentially four
Yeah.
or five core ways. We have ads on our show. These are both programmatic ads and host-read sponsorships. We sell online courses, right? Language courses, business English, test prep, fluency. We license our content that is both our course content and sometimes our podcast content. And we have software. We have an iOS, Android app. So those are the four core ways that we monetize, but everything is essentially built around the podcast. So the podcast is sort of the lifeblood of the business. It doesn't have to be that way. We've also done live events. Those are another option to monetize. So there will be ways to monetize, but you do need to put in the time. Like I said, starting with that framework. What do I stand for? What do I believe in? What's my origin story? And then once you know that, you build a framework for your actual and a template for your episodes. You start to create content and you learn, you build the audience first. So you're doing things like asking them to hit follow. You're being a guest on different shows. You're doing show growth, right? So that you can build that engine that's going to eventually bring the people, which will later eventually bring the sales of whatever you're trying to, whatever your products are.
So you say the first thing you need to work on is your big why, that
Yeah, the
connection.
why. It's really the why. Mm-hmm.
And you can do that as you're talking, right? Because sometimes
Absolutely.
that doesn't come
Yes.
out right away. So you can still be taping episodes and do
Yes.
that, right?
100%. It won't come out right unless you've already figured it out in a prior part of your career. I think I recommend you use the podcast as a way to see what you think. You're kind of throwing ideas out there and seeing what sticks. Maybe you have a co-host, you're throwing around, what do we believe here about language learning, about surgery, about whatever condition it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one is just building that audience. Can you give them some tips of how to do that? Like they're putting out episodes and they're doing that, but
Mm-hmm.
do you have any building tips, like how to really build that before you can
yeah.
monetize?
100%. I mean, the first thing that is the number one rule of growing a show is be a guest on other show, guesting for growth, right? This is something we did in our first 25 or 30 episodes. I think we invited other, established ESL podcasters onto our show. And in many cases, they invited us onto theirs. Not in every case. It's not always such a transactional thing because sometimes it doesn't make sense to be on both shows. But in our case in ESL, it did make sense. So we did a lot of guest collaborations in the very beginning. And that really got us in a nice rhythm of, teaching kind of the Apple Podcast algorithm. Hey, this show is starting to grow. People are quickly downloading multiple episodes in a short period of time. Those are good signals. So get to know everyone in your industry that has a podcast or in related industries. Like for us, the travel industry, expat industry, right? Expat, travel, business, pop culture, maybe communication industry. There are a lot of, related areas that aren't directly your thing, but do touch on your area of expertise.
Yeah, business, international business would be another one. Yeah, you guys hit a lot though, because there's always like, oh, they want us to travel over here, or there's something for that. Okay, so you hit that and you grow it, and you were talking about Apple Podcasts and knowing downloads. What did y'all do to understand what stats to look at? Because here as a business coach, when I'm helping someone understand their clinic, there are stats that they're like, I never even thought to track that. Right.
Yeah.
And so what are the things when you started out, or now that in the beginning you thought, I didn't even know how to track that, or that I was supposed to track that, but it's become very important for us?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the blessing of open RSS is that it's not one platform, right? It's not it's not just YouTube where one day we're there, one day we're not. We have an open RSS feed. So we are an Apple Podcast, we are on Spotify. Those are the two big ones. So yes, there are 100 places our podcast goes live, but realistically the ones that matter are Apple Podcasts, Spotify, maybe Amazon Music, and then YouTube. So we were very heavily focused, and our percentages of our downloads have always been heavily leaning towards Apple Podcasts, globally speaking. And so the hard thing is, currently in the industry, we're in a weird place. The podcasting industry is and has always been very heavy around downloads being the most important metric. But there's a problem with that, in that the way that different apps show downloads is not always accurate. So if I tell you
Oh,
we do have 3.5 to 4 million downloads, that is not human beings, right? We have about 200,000 regular listeners of All Ears English, which is a huge number. We would fill
that's
a huge
huge. Yeah.
stadium, but it's not 4 million people. But people seem to make a mistake and think that, which is ridiculous, right? That would be, I would be like Oprah or something. And so we need to know what
One
our
day.
true audience size is. And we need to try, just know that downloads is kind of a fake number a little bit, and look for the real numbers. So you can find your real followers in Apple. I believe Apple Podcasts, if you sign in to the Apple Podcast database, you have a dashboard. You can see your growth. You can see verified listeners. I believe you can see followers, which is another number, a different number, those that hit the
Yeah.
follow button on your show. And then, of course, in YouTube, you have subscribers. Spotify has its own numbers. There are dashboards where you can bring all of this together. I like to use the bumper dashboard, Bumper. I have a consulting team that helped me to understand our audience growth. So once you get a little bigger, you might hire a team that can help you say, like, okay, are we losing listeners this month? Are we gaining them? What should we do to make sure we're gaining? But that comes with time once you build a more successful show. So I think probably verified listeners is the number you want to look at in Apple Podcasts. That's my suggestion.
Okay. Okay. Well, then everybody's gotta do this. So when, do you have any before we go, because we're getting almost close to the end. I feel like
Yeah.
I could talk to you a lot because of course I'm picking your brain for us. But also too, the people that are going, who are like, you know what, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do this
Do
because
it.
I want to get these patients and I want to get people well, right?
Yes.
How would they go about getting people addicted to their show? When you talk about that, what are some ways that you feel like people can, and addicted in the good way? They like it,
Yeah.
not in the bad way.
Well, if you think about how you build an addiction to anything, let's
Mm,
say, I don't know, you're going to become addicted to chocolate ice cream. You can't just have chocolate ice cream once a month. No, that doesn't build the habit loop. So you essentially you want to help them build a positive habit loop. And
mm,
so we made a really important decision early on that I think allowed us to become kind of an addiction for a lot of our listeners. Originally, our plan was to publish one episode a week, and it would be about a 40-minute episode. But instead, we changed our mind and we said, what if we broke that down into 4 10-minute episodes and we publish 4 days a week? That did two things. It showed the algorithms that we're publishing more frequently, it gave people more to listen to, and it allowed, because we were showing up in their lives 4 days a week instead of 1 day a week, it allowed them to build the habit loop of becoming addicted to All Ears English, which essentially enhanced their lives. It's a good addiction, right? Better than chocolate ice
yeah.
cream. Allowed them to feel like they were improving their listening comprehension, and had them, I mean, some of them have been listening to us for 10 years, right? They're still coming back. So think about your show cadence. Now, it's not easy to publish 4 days a week. I recognize that. But think about how could you maybe do a shorter episode more frequently? If once a week is what you can do that. It's better than nothing. Don't get me wrong. A lot of shows are great shows. I listen to once a week shows and they're great. But if you can play around with a sustainable cadence and show length, give that a little bit of thought, because we know how habits form. They usually don't form in something we do once every 2 weeks. I drink coffee every day. I need it every day. If I
Mhm.
drank it once a week, I probably wouldn't be addicted to it. So that's my tip on addiction.
Well, I love that. And also too, I would think for anything learning or education, which is set off something in my brain for what we do here, is that it's much more easily digestible in 10 minutes. They
Yeah.
can take that 10 minutes and they can really think about it. That it's only 10 minutes out of your day. You can be busy
Yeah.
with kids, work, meetings, doing whatever. And, with all the distractions and the fact that smartphones have really eroded our ability to be able to focus like we
Hmm.
used to focus, that's probably a really great tip. So way
Yeah.
guys, we've been talking to Lindsay McMahon of All Ears English, and will you let them know how they can follow you?
Yeah, sure. So if you're listening inside Apple Podcasts or Spotify right now, you can open your search bar right there inside the podcast and type in All Ears English. And you can open up the show. You'll see the bright yellow and you can hit the follow button, especially if you are a global professional who is looking to improve your English for success, right? For a global life, for travel, or for business. All right.
That sounds great. And guys, we are here. Go to superclinicproject.com. If you go to our free school link, it's the first button. We'll take you right to this episode. You just click on podcast. And then we usually do like a little worksheet or quiz that goes along with this. And we'll put all of Lindsay's information and links there as well. So no matter where you go, whether you go to Apple and you type in All Ears English or superclinicproject.com, you'll be able to get to Lindsay if you want. And guys, please don't forget to like, follow, and share, and give us the 5-star review. That's how we're able to get multi-million download people like Lindsay on the show with her 220,000 active listeners. And hopefully some of them will come over here. And just thank you guys so much. And thank you, Lindsay, for being here today and giving us so much valuable advice. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed our chat. Thank you.
You have a great one.
You too.
You've been listening to the Super Clinic Project podcast. If you like what you hear, subscribe and stay tuned for further episodes of the Super Clinic Project podcast.